Okay, welcome. My name is John Drury, and I teach theology and spiritual formation at Wesley Seminary at Indiana Wesleyan University. And here I am in my, playroom slash music room. Uh, that's a bit of a mess, but alas. And this video is about why study Evagrius of Pontus, or Evagrius Ponticus, which just means of Pontus, from Pontus. This is directed at my DMIN students in spiritual formation who are reading Evagrius with me this month in preparation for a course later this spring. But I thought, might as well throw it up on YouTube. So if anyone else wants to look at it, they can. But anyway, this is for you guys. You know who you are. So I have 3 reasons why I assigned Evagrius in this course and why I think he's worth studying. The first is personal reasons. The second are programmatic, connected to the DMIN program that would have broader application, though, in terms of just curricular design. And third, the proverbial. Again, once I had 2 P's, I had to go with a P for the third. So, alas, preacher's disease. So the first is the personal reasons. This is just my own personal story with Evagrius. He writes these little quotes, and I heard him quoted when I was a senior in college. So this is almost 20 years ago now. I saw this quote that said, if you are a theologian, you will pray truly. And if you pray truly, you are a theologian. And that just grabbed my heart as one who desired prayer, though didn't practice it as deeply as I desired at the time. But already had kind of had a sense of vocation to become a theologian, historical, systematic theologian of some sort, had been inspired by Bud Bentz and others to pursue that vocation. And as the spiritual life kind of came in and out, it was that quote kind of haunted me. It wasn't something that I spent a lot of time with thinking about or anything, but it haunted me for years after. I would remember that quote and think like, wow, what do prayer and theology have to do with each other, and how are they united in my life? And I'm still sort of sorting that out. And maybe never will, but learning to live into it, I think, more now than 20 years ago, I suppose. That was that first encounter with him. But it wasn't really till maybe 5 or so years ago when I was first kind of sniffing around about the Enneagram, because I was kind of hearing about it in my spiritual direction training, and I was reading Rohr's book on the Enneagram, and he kind of links the Enneagram to the Christian tradition by way of Evagrius and his study of the 8 deadly sins, which include a 9th in his full treatment. And so it was really, it kind of created a little fascination, because Evagrius was very into, numerology and had all these great spiritual quotes. I was like, who is this guy? Who is this guy? And the year after that, we had a book by McGuckin, edited by John McGuckin. It's kind of a mini Philokalia, a mini collection of wise sayings from the Desert Fathers. And it was just loaded with Evagrius quotes. And it's like, who is this guy? He keeps showing up, right? And by the end of that year, as I was working through that text, which I just love, it's a great sort of thing to buy if you can get it. McGuckin edited it. The title always, it has Desert Fathers in the title. I just always forget the main title, but anyway, Mystical Chapters, I think, is in the title. But Evagrius just kept showing up, but then there was this one quote that really just grabbed my heart, and it was this line: "Breast of the Lord is intimate knowledge of God. The one who reclines upon it will become a theologian." And it came clear to me over time that that's referring to John, the gospel writer, who, the beloved disciple who rests on the breast of the Lord at the Last Supper, and who becomes the first to be named theologian in the Greek tradition, John, and then Gregory of Nazianzen 400 years later, and then Simeon, the new theologian. So this notice of theologian being used in the Eastern tradition as one who knows God truly, deeply, intimately, and then hands on that contemplative knowledge to others through a distinct teaching that's utterly crucial for the tradition. So anyway, John the theologian, but notice how that just kind of brings us back to that first quote that haunted me. And it was like, that was the moment when I just felt so grabbed in that I was like, I think this guy just chose me. And I mean, he's become my dead mentor really for the last about 3 years or so of just spending a lot of time in his works very slowly, working through a number of his materials. A lot of the books on acedia that I've read in recent years, that particular vice, he shows up a lot because he's this kind of master analyzer of acedia, the vice. So anyway, I know I'm just kind of talking about myself, not really talking about Evagrius, but if it has any relevance to just kind of capture, to kind of see how a person might come to relate to an old dead mentor and how that kind of comes about. So now I read one line from Evagrius every weekday. He writes these short pieces, and so you're able to kind of spend that time meditating on it. And it's been very, very transformative. So how does this fit in? And the second reason is the programmatic. That's the personal reason. If y'all know me, you might be like, oh, well, I know him, I like him, so now I might like this. If you don't know me, hopefully it still was a way to introduce Evagrius a little bit, some of the cool things in a more random, present, contemporary way. But programmatically, how does it fit into this course? Well, this is a doctoral level program. It's a DMIN, doctorate. And so it seems good. It's sort of, we're assuming, you have to have MDiv equivalents to come into this. So I'm thinking, I want to make sure to assign figures that are not sort of like totally well known. You know what I mean? I want them to be somewhat obscure so that you're not just reading stuff you've already read before. And Evagrius is probably not someone most people spend a lot of time with in an MDiv. So I'm assuming this is, but not just so obscure that he's irrelevant. He's actually extremely influential. He got caught up after his death in certain controversies associated with certain things. And so it got some condemnations and there was books burned. There's a whole story that we can get into sometime, but so his legacy was kind of lost until more recently in the last 50, 100 years. So as the DMIN program, it seems good to do someone a little bit more advanced, a little bit more obscure, who's still really influential and who had a lot of influence, though, in a kind of a more underground way, which I think hopefully should be kind of fascinating and interesting. This is a course in historical theology. The spring courses are in historical theology. So I wanted to pick classic figures. Every year we'll do an ancient, medieval, and modern figure. So I was thinking, what's an ancient figure that kind of fits the theme of the year of personal spiritual formation? And Evagrius seemed like a good pick because of that obscurity and but yet deep influence, but in a sort of subterranean way. And also because, as we're entering into kind of spiritual theology, which broadly speaking speaks of the work of the Spirit in our lives, and it usually has two subcategories: ascetic theology and mystical theology, the theological reflection on practice, on the way we come to be purified and prepared to enter the presence of God, and then mystical theology, which explores the goal of that life, which is that union with God himself. So loosely the active and the passive, active and contemplative life would be maybe another way of putting it. Evagrius is nice because he really does speak to both of these. And I selected the text we're working through, Ad Monikos, because it's one of the few texts where you really have a lot of quotes about both. Most of his books, like his two most famous books, Practicos and the 153 chapters on prayer, basically relate to ascesis and mystagogy, the active life and the contemplative life loosely. And so whereas like Ad Monikos kind of has both in it, appealed to throughout, but maybe first half, second half loosely. I mean, that's very, very loose. But so it's one of the few books that has kind of both of those aspects. I thought it'd be a good sort of entry point in terms of a historical text that explores both sides of spiritual theology. But in terms of personal spiritual formation, why was he a good one for this year? And it seemed to me fitting because he is such a sort of a self-awareness master, right? Because he's this hermit. He's speaking mostly to hermits. So he's talking about individual spiritual formation, although highly attuned to the relational aspects of that. And is a kind of depth psychologist, as it were, of the way that demons/thoughts work in our lives. Just very observant and wise. And so that's so key for self-awareness, is to kind of notice, what are my traps and my temptations? And so to have a, careful student of the soul in the mix, I think really fits a historical theology of personal spiritual formation. So that's all the programmatic kind of stuff. And then lastly, the proverbial, again, poorly named. It's really the sort of the literary or the style. It's his proverbial style, though. That's why I picked that. The proverbial style. He writes in the form of proverbs. Most of his writings are in short little chunks, little almost fragments of thought with a depth dimension to them. But they're real simple, one line on the top, but then you can spend time with them. The two quotes I've already shared have that quality. Very simple thoughts, can be memorized, internalized, and yet so much depth, right? This is his style. It fits the desert style, where people would be off in their caves working on their manual labor and praying, and then when they would have troubles, they would go visit an Abba, a spiritual father, a spiritual director. This is the origins of spiritual direction in the Christian tradition, and they would share what's going on in their life, and then the Abba would listen, and then they would say a little line, a little proverb, a saying, and the novice might not really know what it means or how it relates to what they just shared, but they take it and meditate on it and chew on it while they go back to working and praying alone. Over time, hopefully then the fruit emerges. So biggest tip I can say when reading someone like Evagrius is ideally read like about one a day, maybe a couple, but don't try to sit down and bang through. You could, it's a short book. But really read a few at most, ideally one a day for a season, right? Slowly going through. I think if we're trying to get it through in a month, you're going to have to do more than one a day. Maybe like 5, 6 a day, but maybe really focus in on one that you really end up chewing on, right, all day. That's kind of how it's designed to be read. So it's this proverb style that I think connects us up historically with a different culture, a different world, helps us think about how language can transform us in small chunks that we chew on, and especially to break us out of our academic prosaic way of reading, right, where we're looking for an argument and a thesis, right, and we're trying to inform ourselves. Right? This is formational reading, right, and so really learning how to meditate on and chew on little thoughts, as well as then pushing us out, because he sometimes uses some obscure language. So, you look at the footnotes, you look at some of the commentary to get some help, but you also just chew on it and see what discoveries through scriptural allusion and life experience kind of draws out the insights that are being handed on to you. Okay, that's all I got on why study Evagrius. Some personal reasons, some programmatic reasons, and some literary proverbial sorts of reasons. I love this guy. He's my dead mentor right now. Has been now for a few years, as I said, and it's a delight, and not without a little trepidation, though, to invite others to share in this mentorship. So I hope that he will bless you in the way that he has blessed me too. All right, be sure to like and subscribe the John Drury channel here that you're on. And also check me out on Twitter at John L. Drury, JOHNLDRURY, as well as check out the Fresh Text podcast that I co-host with Aaron Perry, where it's just two profs, sometimes with other folks, but it's mostly Aaron right now, where we just break out the lectionary text for the upcoming Sunday and have a fresh conversation, what we observe in the text, and swap some sermon ideas. Great place to get your own juices flowing. That drops every Monday morning, and it can help be a part of your process as you're sermon prepping or just for your own formation. So, all right, bye.